Fantastic. We're so happy to have you. I am Jackie with Hub City, and just so you know, I'm going to be taking questions after John's talk from the chat window. The chat is at the bottom of your screen. You should be able to see it pop up. If you click on it, just type in your questions and I'll voice them to John at the end. For now, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Ann Waters and let her give John an introduction. Thank you again.
Welcome, everybody. Good evening. What a pleasure it is to have you all. Welcome to the virtual cocktail party, publication party of Old Abe at the Hub City Bookshop. I am Ann Waters, and it's my honor to introduce our guest of honor, John Cribb. John has written and collaborated on many books over the years, including The American Patriot's Almanac, which he wrote in response to the 9/11 attacks, and The Educated Child, which he co-authored with his longtime friend, William Bennett. But Old Abe is his first novel, and it's truly a labor of love. Opening on May 9th, 1860, on the eve of Lincoln's nomination, Old Abe chronicles the final 5 years of his life. Set against the backdrop of America's brutal Civil War, it is an intimate portrayal of Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln's personal trials and tribulations while in the White House, including the loss of their young son, Willie, the second of their 4 children to die in childhood. As chairman of the Hub City Writers Project Board of Directors, John has given generously of his time and energy, for which the staff and I are grateful. He is equally generous with his financial support. He wanted this event to be a fundraiser for Hub City Writers Project, so all the proceeds this evening are going to benefit our organization. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hub City Bookshop. If you would raise a glass and toast to our guest of honor, John Cribb. Cheers.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you, Ann, for those kind words. And I hope everybody can see me. And yeah. I've got Jackie. You'll know I have a couple of friends just texted Adam and Bridget Webb. They may be under Webb or Lloyd. They couldn't get in, but maybe they are or not. But if you see them trying to get in, they're zooming in from Seattle. So if we can get them in, great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ann. Thank you all for coming. This day has been a long day in coming, and I'm a little more nervous than I thought I'd be. Maybe because we have so many people, but it's probably because this day has been such a long day in coming. But we're with lots of friends and loved ones here, so I don't mind being nervous in front of you guys. But let me start by thanking the Hub City Writers Project, which I know that a lot of y'all know about Hub City, but it is a fantastic organization. It is a treasure of Spartanburg and South Carolina and the whole South, and really beyond, because it has become in many ways a model literary organization for lots of places around the country. So I'm as always thrilled to be associated with it in any way at all. So thanks to them for running this get together tonight. Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Jackie. Jackie worked long and hard to put this together. So big thanks to Jackie. I'm not going to try to thank everybody associated with this book. Otherwise we would be here all night, but just a few people. Your literary agent and your editor and your publisher and your publicist are kind of critical people in the life of a book. So I do want to thank Marley Rusoff, my wonderful, wonderful agent. She's a legend in the literary world and deserves to be. And Eric Campman and Al Regnery and Megan Trank at Republic Books. Thanks for giving Old Abe a shot. Really, I can't thank you enough. And then Kathy Bennett, publicist extraordinaire, who's actually over here to my right. And a lot of y'all know Kathy here in Spartanburg, as well as Dean Drasnan, who publicist out in Iowa, who was going to try to zoom in. So Dean may be with us or not, I'm not sure. And my friend Doreen Burns is helping out too. So I can't thank y'all enough, really can't. Then I want to thank real quickly the co-hosts of this get together who helped round y'all up and get you here. Just real quickly, Reed and Michael Tuning, our dear, dear friends Reed and Michael. We own an old sailboat over on the west coast of South Carolina, otherwise known as Lake Hartwell with Reed and Michael, the Palmetto Queen. Isn't that a great name for a boat, Palmetto Queen? So they are dear friends. Thank you, Reed and Michael. Haiti and Gardner Corson. Haiti is a board member here at Hub City Writers Project, or a relatively new board member. She's great, has become a good friend, so thanks to Haiti and Gardner. My cousin Kenny Cribb, who I owe a lot to in a lot of different ways, but thanks, Kenny. We were going to try to do this in Kenny's wonderful library, but you know, given the circumstances, decided that was not a good idea. But it's one of the most beautiful rooms in Spartanburg. We're really in South Carolina, so maybe we can do something else there soon. Hallie and Chip Hurst, our dear, dear old friends. Hallie was one of the first people to speak up and say, John, I want to do something for you when the book comes out. We want to do something. And we thought about doing this in their backyard, but again, just decided we better Zoom. So thank you, Hallie and Chip. You are dear, dear friends. Deborah McAfee and Byron Morris. Byron is also on the board of the Hub City Writers Project and a great friend, as is Deborah, who is also, we've discovered Deborah is one of the best cooks in Spartanburg. And, you know, I say that very carefully because some of you guys know I've got some cousins in this town who can cook, but Deborah holds her own. So thank you, Deborah and Byron. My dear, dear cousin, Evelyn Ritchie, and her husband, Jim. Evelyn is such a sweetheart. And everybody who knows Evelyn says she's a sweetheart. And Jim is the guy that came up with the idea of a cocktail party, telling everybody to pour a glass of wine. So thank you, Jim and Evelyn. Sally and Warwick Spencer. Sally's also a board member here at Hub City. You may be sensing a trend in that, but she's a fantastic board member and has become a great friend. They both have their neighbors of ours, wonderful people. Thank you, Sally. Warwick. Michelle and Elliot Stone. Michelle is one of the literary stars of the South and has been a big help. And they are wonderful, great, great people and wonderful friends. So thank you, Michelle and Elliot. Michelle is a former board member of the Hub City Writers Project, former board chair. And finally, Mary Helen and Greg Wade, two of my oldest friends in Spartanburg. We were at Spartan High together. I think we were each 1 year apart. And Mary Helen was also one of the first people to speak up and say she wanted to help out. So thank you, Mary Helen and Greg. You're all great friends. So thanks to all the co-hosts. You know, I can't tell how much it means for me all to be here. We have, I don't know how many people we have on. We have 100 people in right now, and hopefully we can get more in if they signed up. I think we'd lifted the cap, so if more come, hopefully we can let them in. But it means so much. I'm humbled, and we had people register from all over the country. Obviously Spartanburg and the Carolinas, but also all across the South, Mississippi and Texas and the West, you know, the Colorado and the Mountain States, friends and family in California and Washington State, the Midwest, Indiana and Missouri and Illinois, and then up into Virginia, the DC area, and New York and New England, and even Canada. Our friends Nancy and Clive, I think, are zooming in from the Toronto area. So they're international Zoomers tonight. So thank you all. Finally, I want to thank my family. The last of my thanks. Kirsten and Molly and Sarah. Kirsten is zooming at home with my mom and my sister Mary tonight. But Kirsten, Molly, and Sarah have been very patient with this book, believe me. And Molly and Sarah pretty much grew up with it. I think Molly's zooming in from Furman, I believe. And Sarah, I'm not sure about. Sarah's a freshman at Clemson. I think she had an evening class, but I love you guys. Thank you. Okay, enough of the thanks. I'm going to try to now, if I can do this, let's see if I can try it. This is going to work. I'm going to try to fill up the screen. There we go. Jackie, is that working?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about why I wrote this book, Old Abe, and how I wrote it, and why I think it's important for people to know about Lincoln. And then I'll answer any questions that anybody has. Like Jackie says, we'll do it through the chat feature. So pour a glass of wine if you hadn't already. I think this is just a one glass talk. It won't be that long, maybe a glass and a half. It depends on how fast y'all drink, how thirsty you are, and how fast I talk maybe. And I will talk a little bit about Old Abe, which I wrote because I love Lincoln, as many of you know, and I want other people to know about him and hopefully love him as well. I think we need Lincoln more than ever these days. So I should start by telling you that Lincoln has been a hero from history of mine for a long time, early childhood. And some of my earliest memories from childhood are of sitting on the living room couch in Spartanburg, South Carolina, with my mom, Cribb, and a lot of y'all know Khaki. She's a piano teacher here in Spartanburg. She has been a piano teacher for longer than I've been alive, so a long time. Let's put it that way. And she's still teaching piano, believe it or not. But my mom would, my sister Mary, my brother Warner would sit on the couch with my mom when we were really little. My sister Troy was not here yet with us, but she came along later. She now lives in DC with her family, and I think is zooming in. But mom would sit on the couch with us, and she would read aloud to us, as good parents do, and all kinds of things. She would read The Boxcar Children and the Bobbsey Twins, and from the old Childcraft series there, which I hope you're seeing on the left side of your screen, which was a great collection of stories and poems. Some of y'all might remember it. And then there was a series called the Childhood of Famous Americans biography series, including Abe Lincoln, Frontier Boy, that you see on the right there. And I distinctly remember mom reading these stories about Lincoln walking through the woods to borrow a book and splitting logs to make fence rails and studying by firelight and all that. And it grabbed me right away because I was young. I couldn't even read back then. One of the stories that I distinctly remember mom reading is the story about how Lincoln, when the Lincolns were living in southern Indiana, they lived in a tiny little settlement called Little Pigeon Creek. And one day Lincoln decided to play a trick on his stepmother, Sally Lincoln. She had just whitewashed the ceiling of the cabin where they lived, and she was very proud of it. And so when her back was turned, he picked up a cousin and dipped his feet in mud and flipped him upside down and had him walk across the ceiling and leave those muddy footprints on the ceiling. I think that Sally Lincoln had a good sense of humor, luckily for Abe, so she laughed it off. I'm sure she made him clean it up too. But I distinctly remember mom reading that story. Over on the right there, that poem by Nancy Bird Turner is from the old Childcraft series. As a matter of fact, that's from the book that mom used to read to us from. I've got it now. And that first verse reads, there was a boy of other days, a quiet, awkward, earnest lad who trudged long, weary miles to get a book on which his heart was set, and then no candle had. They don't write them like that anymore, do they? But this stuff, as I say, it grabbed my attention about Lincoln early on. Then when I was in the fourth grade, and this is a shout out to the Spartanburg Day School. I know I've got some day school people zooming in, but I think it was the fourth grade, might have been fifth, but Ann Cheney, who was our English teacher, she had everybody in the class, much to our chagrin, memorize the Gettysburg Address. And we had to take turns standing up at the front of the room, one by one. We each had a day we had to do it, stand up there and recite the Gettysburg Address to the rest of the class. And those words and sentiments sank in deeply with me. I didn't know it at the time, but they did. And which just goes to show that maybe it's a good idea to memorize something in school every once in a while. I think that Ann Cheney knew that. So thank you, Mrs. Cheney, because it made a difference. When we were in the sixth grade at the day school, the big field trip every year for the sixth grade class was to go down to Charleston. Much anticipated field trip, and the class would always go out to Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, where of course the Civil War began. And again, it's one of these things that got me interested in history and Civil War history from an early age. My mom is from Lookout Mountain, Tennessee, just outside of Chattanooga, and I know a lot of y'all have been there. And so we would go over and visit my grandparents, and we would, at an early age, I was walking across these battlefields over there, like Point Park. This is Point Park on top of the mountain. It was right down the street from where my mom grew up. That's Chattanooga and Moccasin Bend and the Tennessee River down below. but Chickamauga and Missionary Ridge, the battlefields over there, I was exposed to, as I say, at an early age, and that got me interested in Civil War history very early on. We have ancestors on both sides of my family that fought in the Civil War. So, grew up hearing stories about them. My favorite story is about this guy, Joseph Henry Warner, my great-great-grandfather on my mother's side. And he was captured at the Battle of Missionary Ridge outside of Chattanooga with about 400 other Confederate soldiers and sent up to Rock Island, Illinois, a prisoner of war camp up there. And spent a good time up there, and a good bit of time. And while he was there, he made friends with the Union soldier who was one of his guards. I hope I get the story right. If I get it wrong, one of my cousins will set me straight. Maybe my cousin Joni. She's zooming in from Raleigh, I think. But he made friends with the prison guard. His last name was Porter. So after the war, they agreed that if they both made it through the war, they would name their sons after each other. So after the war, my great-great-grandfather named his son Porter Warner, and there's been more than one Porter Warner on that side of the family. And hopefully there's some Warner Porters running around Illinois and the Midwest, because it's a great story. But anyway, as I say, a lot of my interest in Civil War came from going over to Lookout Mountain, where my mom and her sister Francie and her sister Joan and her brother Bill, who I think are all zooming in tonight, they all grew up. And these things, they have an effect on you, a long-lasting effect, and they did for me. I have been writing pretty much my whole career, but it's been mostly on the nonfiction side. But I've always wanted to write a novel. I was an English major at Vanderbilt, and I think I have a few Vanderbilt friends zooming in tonight, including David Ayers, the greatest RA in the history of Vanderbilt, is zooming in from Jackson, I think. But I majored in English, so yeah, I do love literature. I'd always wanted to write a novel, but it didn't occur to me to write a novel until about Lincoln, until 2006. And in that year, I checked out of the Spartanburg County Public Library, the greatest library system in the world. I checked out Carl Sandburg's landmark biography of Abraham Lincoln. It's a 6-volume biography, maybe the most beautifully written of the Lincoln nonfiction biographies, especially those first 2 volumes, The Prairie Years. But I checked that this is my set you're looking at now, but I didn't have it back then. So I checked it out of the library. I was plowing my way through this. At the same time, I checked out of a library Irving Stone's wonderful novel about the life of Michelangelo, The Agony and the Ecstasy. I know some of y'all have read it. And I had read it in Spartanburg High School. Dick Dargan assigned it to us in our AP European History class. And I wish Dick was still around today. He was a wonderful teacher, wonderful guidance counselor. He passed away not long ago. But he assigned this book, and I liked it at the time. So I was rereading The Agony and the Ecstasy, which is a novelization of Michelangelo's life, as I was reading the Sandburg biographies. And it made me wonder if you could kind of do the same thing for Lincoln. And that was the original idea behind my book. So that was a daunting idea, because there are a lot of books out there about Abraham Lincoln, thousands of books. About 10 years ago, somebody counted all the Lincoln books and got up to about 15,000, and I think he stopped there. And that was 10 years ago, so there are more since then. They say there are more books about Lincoln than anybody in history except for Jesus Christ, and I think that may well be right. But this is the Tower of Lincoln books at the across the street from Ford's Theater in Washington on 10th Street. They have an educational leadership center, and they've got this 3.5-story high tower of books just to kind of represent, let people know how many there are. And that's just a fraction of the Lincoln books out there. So this was a daunting thing to try to, to add a book to this pile. But most of the books out there about Lincoln, the overwhelming majority are nonfiction. There are not that many novels. And I really wanted to do fiction because I wanted to try to bring Lincoln alive and make him a walking, talking, breathing fellow, not just that, that stiff image we see on the penny or the $5 bill. And, fiction can bring characters alive in ways, obviously, that nonfiction can't. So I wanted to try fiction, but I wanted it to be historically accurate. I really did. I wanted to try to be true to his life. So that meant lots of research, lots of reading, lots of books, trying to read through. The last time I counted, just on my bookshelves alone at my office at home, I have over 250 books, Lincoln-related books. And it's probably more by now, but everything from general biographies about Lincoln to books by people who knew Lincoln and had firsthand interactions with them. That was very important for my research. So lots and lots of book reading. Also lots of internet research. And there are tons of sites out there that have a lot of good information on Lincoln. Like this one, the Abraham Lincoln Papers at the Library of Congress, where you can go online and see, digital images of the original documents in his handwriting, like the Gettysburg Address that you're looking at there. That over on the left side of the screen now, I hope you're seeing, is a campaign banner from the 1860 election. So, you can see all kinds of stuff like that. On the right, that is Antietam in Maryland with the Dunker Church there in the background. It's a very famous image from the Civil War. So there are obviously lots of Civil War battle sites out there. Lincoln is the only president to hold a patent. Before he was president, he invented a device to float steamboats off of sandbars and shoals when they got caught on the bottom of rivers. And I don't know if anybody ever used it, but he had this patent. And so he had to, back then you had to submit a model with your patent application. So that's his model there that he made on the left. I think I got that off the Patent Office website. On the right there, you're looking at a diagram of the White House as it existed in Lincoln's day, the second floor. That's from a great site called Mr. Lincoln's White House. You can go and click on any of those rooms and pull up pictures of what it looked like at the time and stories that about what happened in those rooms. So there is an amazing amount of scholarship out there about Lincoln, and has been, long before the internet came along, for generations. There's been great scholarship on Lincoln. My book would not exist without the work of these scholars over the decades, that's for sure. Also did, of course, got to do some Lincoln traveling. So I went to all the Lincoln sites, all the major Lincoln sites I've been to more than once, every place from Sinking Spring Farm, there on the left-hand side of the screen, where he was born in Kentucky, born in a log cabin, and now there's this marble temple there, to Ford's Theater there on the right, where he was, of course, assassinated. That's the president's box where he was shot. DC, I know a lot of y'all have been there. Places like on the left there, that's New Salem Historic Village in Illinois, where he spent 6 years as a young man. That's a recreation of the general store that he had with a fellow named Bill Berry. That's a great place to go if you're interested in Lincoln. It's just west of Springfield. Had about 100 people living in it at the time when he lived there, which was the same size as Chicago, believe it or not, in the 1830s. But they've recreated the village. On the right there is the old state capitol in Springfield, where he spent most of his adult life. He served in the state legislature there for several years. And of course, the Lincoln home is there. So Springfield, I visited quite a bit. It was a great place to go if you're interested in Lincoln. Just a couple more images. Of course, lots of battlefield visits. I think that's Antietam again there on the left, maybe the most beautiful of all the Civil War battlefields. If you go to either Gettysburg or Antietam, be sure to hire one of the guides, either the Gettysburg guides or the Antietam guides. They are these mostly retired people, but they're experts in those battles, and they will spend all day with you if you want, and will any phase or facet of the battle you're interested in, they will tell you about. The guide I hired at Antietam, his expertise is Lincoln's visit to the battlefield right after the battle. Lincoln went up there to see what was going on. So I spent a day walking over the Antietam with him. On the right there, that's one of my favorite Lincoln sites. And next time you go to DC, when things have opened up in Washington again, if you want a good off the beaten path place to go, that's the Lincoln Cottage, or the President's Cottage. It's in Northwest DC. It's open to the public. It's also called the Old Soldiers' Home. This was the early Camp David of its day.
I'm trying to.
And the Lincolns would live there during the summer. I think. Can y'all hear me? I've got a kickback. I see Kirsten. Kirsten, can you hear me? Okay.
Somebody needs to mute.
Yeah, I think some people have accidentally muted. If Jack, if you can mute everybody. I think, Paige, I think you need to mute yourself.
I'm muted.
You are muted?
I'm Billy's nearby.
Okay. Jackie,
Sorry.
Jackie, if you can hit mute for everybody.
Oh.
I'm not sure where Jackie went. I'm going to check on her. But anyway, the Lincoln Cottage was the Camp David of its day. And the Lincolns would live there during the summers while Lincoln was president. It was on the edge of town. And he would commute into the White House, about 3 miles from the White House. It was up in the hills, so it could catch some breezes. It was a little cooler, a little quieter. But this is one of these places where you can come into contact with Lincoln's world, literally. As you walk up and down the stairs there, you can put your hand on the stairway banister that he put his hand on as you walk up and down, which for a Lincoln geek like me is a big deal. It's a thrill. Believe it or not, there are not that many places where you can do that. You can literally touch his world. But visits to places like these were crucial for my research to try to absorb the world that he lived in. And the rangers and docents and the historians and volunteers that work in places like this are often the experts in that one slice of Lincoln's life. So their insights are invaluable. So anyway, between all this research and reading and traveling and writing and drafting and rewriting, and there's a lot of rewriting, believe me. It took from conception to finished product more than a dozen years to complete this thing, which is embarrassing, I'll admit. But in my defense, it was it was a part-time effort. I had other projects going on, thank goodness, or we would have been in a poorhouse. And sometimes the manuscript would sit in a drawer for months or a year without my looking at it, and then I'd pull it out and work on it. So it was a labor of love, but a very on and off labor of love, as books often are. Y'all who have written books, you know that. But at any rate, there's a lot of history in this book. This book basically covers the last 5 years of Abraham Lincoln's life, starting in the spring of 1860 when he was nominated for president, and you're at his side every scene, every chapter, as he goes through the Civil War and his presidency. You're with him the whole way. So everything that's in the book happened. Sometimes I had to condense scenes, and of course I had to leave a lot out, but it all happened. All the characters that walk often on the pages were real people for the most part. Every once in a while I had to invent a minor character to help move the story along, but there are people like Mary Todd Lincoln and Tad and Ulysses S. Grant and Frederick Douglass. These are the people walking on and off the pages. The dialogue, I really dug into primary source documents to try to, letters and speeches and articles from those days to find the words that these people actually wrote and spoke, and tried to build them into the dialogue as much as I could. So, and of course I used my imagination to fill in the details, the gaps, and that's what makes it fiction, historical fiction, and made it a lot of fun to write. So I said when I started a few minutes ago that I wrote this book because I love Lincoln and I want others to know him and love him as well. So why do I want to know people? Why do I think they should know Lincoln? To answer that question, I'm going to turn to a couple of people who are a lot smarter than I am. And one is my good friend, Bill Bennett, who has been a great mentor over the years, knows a lot about Lincoln and history himself, and was very kind to supply the foreword to this book. And in the foreword, Bill tells a story. He recounts a story told by this guy, Leo Tolstoy, the great Russian novelist. And I know it's kind of weird to see him popping up in a talk on Lincoln, but in his foreword, Bill retells a story that Tolstoy told around the beginning of the 20th century. Tolstoy was spending some time in the Caucasus, that region between the Black and the Caspian Seas. He was in a very remote region, a mountainous region, and he spent some time with a tribe of mountain horsemen. And he had dinner with the chieftain of this tribe. And then he says about 20 guys, a score of wild-looking riders, as Tolstoy put it, joined them. And they spent the evening talking, and I'm sure there was some vodka being passed around. And they asked Tolstoy to tell them about great statesmen and generals of the past, people like Alexander the Great and Caesar and Napoleon. So Tolstoy did that. And then when he was done telling them about those people, he says, I'm going to read from Bill's foreword just a few sentences. Tolstoy says, when I declared that I'd finished my talk, my host, a gray-bearded, tall rider, rose, lifted his hand, and said very gravely, but you have not told us a syllable about the greatest general and greatest ruler of the world. We want to know something about him. He was a hero. He spoke with a voice of thunder. He laughed like the sunrise, and his deeds were strong as the rock and sweet as the fragrance of roses. His name was Lincoln, and the country in which he lived is called America, which is so far away that if a youth should journey to reach it, he would be an old man when he arrived. Tell us of that man. Tell us, please, and we will present you with the best horse of our stock, shouted the others. Tolstoy told them of Lincoln's wisdom, home life, and youth. They asked me 10 questions to 1, which I was able to answer, Tolstoy says. They wanted to know all about his habits, his influence upon the people, and his physical strength. After all my knowledge of Lincoln was exhausted, they seemed to be satisfied. I can hardly forget the great enthusiasm which they expressed in their wild thanks. This little incident proves how largely the name of Lincoln is worshipped throughout the world and how legendary his personality has become. So that's 100 years ago, Tolstoy, 100 years ago, the turn of the 20th century. So if a score of wild-looking writers in the remote Caucasus want to know so badly about Lincoln, surely we Americans should too, even 100 years later, right? So why should we all hope so? I hope some of them are. I'm not sure though. Hope they're at least reading his words. Lots of Americans read his words when they go to the Lincoln Memorial. I know a lot of y'all have been there, and you climb that long flight of steps up to the memorial, and when you're standing in front of that great statue of Lincoln, the Daniel Chester French statue, if you look to your left, inscribed in marble is the Gettysburg Address, and off to the right, inscribed in marble, is the second inaugural address. That's it there. I know some of y'all have stood there and read those words. I think that Lincoln's words will live as long as America lives, as long as the idea of America lives, and vice versa. The idea of America will live as long as Lincoln's words live, and only that long. And when his words are gone, America, I think, will be gone. So his words. Fourth answer to that question: why know Lincoln's life? Fourth answer, and there's that great statue in the memorial. His life is worth knowing simply because for his life itself. It was a great life. He was a great man, and there's a lot to learn from his life and the virtues that he embodied. Virtues like perseverance. Lincoln was a model of perseverance. Believe me. If you want to study perseverance, study Lincoln. It is a virtue that he learned growing up on the frontier, where you pretty much persevered or you died out there, and he took that with him to Washington, where he persevered through 4 tough, long years. Lincoln used to tell people, he said, "I'm like a man trying to keep a tent up in a storm, and I've got this tent up, and the wind blows out one of the tent stakes, so I grab a hammer and I peg it back down to the ground. And as soon as I get it in, the wind blows out another tent stake. So I run around to the other side of the tent and I peg it back down. And as soon as I get it in, another stake gets blown out. So I run around and I peg it back down." And he told people, he said, "That's all I do all day long, is I keep pegging away. And that's all I mean to keep doing is pegging away." So he is a model of perseverance. Other virtues like eagerness to learn, an intellectual virtue. Lincoln used to say that his father, Tom Lincoln, sent him to school by littles, a little here and a little there, out on the frontier, and in between plantings and plowings. Those littles added up to less than 1 year of formal education. His entire life, 1 year, less than a year, and that took place in little log cabin schoolhouses on Indiana and Kentucky. But he loved to learn, he loved to read, and he taught himself, and he was brilliant at that, and he was brilliant at learning on the job. That's one reason he was such a great president. Other virtues like compassion. I think it's no accident that the man who wrote and signed the Emancipation Proclamation was a man of great compassion. His honesty, believe it or not, Honest Abe really was an honest guy. I'm not going to say he never told a lie. He could be a crafty politician when he needed to be, but overall, he was a man of the highest integrity. His patriotism, that's a great civic virtue to have. Patriotism, that's love of country. Lincoln loved this country fiercely, and he loved those founding principles that I talked about a minute ago. And faith, he was a man of great faith in the White House. It was a complicated faith, but a deep faith. It gave him the strength to make it through the war, and it gave him the wisdom to be a great leader. So if you were looking for a hero from history, and I think everybody should have a hero from history, you know, somebody you pick out from the past who you can get to know and study and revere for their life, their character, their words, their accomplishments, and you kind of use them as a yardstick to, you know, something to aim for. If you're looking for a hero from history, you cannot do any better than Abraham Lincoln. So his life is worth knowing. Finally, last answer to that question: why know Lincoln? Why know his story? I think you know the American story a lot better if you know Lincoln's story, because in a lot of ways he stands center stage in the American story. And in a lot of ways, he represents the best of American ideals. He certainly represents the American dream of hard work and achievement and opportunity. In a lot of ways, he embodies the American struggle for freedom and equality. Like I say, if you're looking for a hero from history, choose Lincoln. If you want to know the American story, know Lincoln's story. So for all those reasons, I think Lincoln is worth loving and knowing. And as I say, that's why I wrote this novel. And I hope if you read it, that it will bring him alive for you. And also hope if you read it, it will help you remember and understand just what an extraordinary service he performed for this nation, because he really was the hero, the giant hero in that epic struggle to save the country and defend our founding principles, and of course, free millions of enslaved Americans. Tolstoy says, I'll close with one last Tolstoy quote. Tolstoy said that Lincoln was great through his simplicity and was noble through his charity. He is a strong type of those who make for truth and justice, for brotherhood and freedom. Love is the foundation of his life. That is what makes him immortal, and that is the quality of a giant. I think Tolstoy was right about that, and I hope if I've done his description some justice in this book. So I've gone on plenty long enough about Old Abe. I'm going to try to get out of my thank you, screen sharing here. Let's see if I can do that. There we go. Is that Jackie? Am I out? And,
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions that they've sent in, I'll be glad to take them. Real quickly, let me just mention, Kathy Bennett asked me to tell you, and I always do what Kathy tells me, that as we go forward through the next weeks and months, if any of y'all, wherever you live, have groups that you would like me to talk to, either book clubs or church groups or civic groups, or any groups, let me know. I would love to talk to them about Lincoln, because as you can tell, I will talk to anybody about Lincoln. I love talking about Lincoln. So give me a holler, email me, or I have a website, thanks to Kathy and Jeremy Powers. It's johncribbauthor.com, johncribbauthor.com, and you can shoot me an email through that if you want to get in touch with me. So, any questions, Jackie?
Yeah, we have a few questions.
Okay.
We started with one from Melissa. She says, congrats and thank you, John. How do you bring a historical figure to life without getting bogged down and including so much historical detail that you overwhelm the reader? It seems like a daunting task.
Yeah, well, it is a daunting task, and for me especially, because I love the research. I mean, I just love that part of doing something like this, and I really have to make myself stop doing the research. So that's what I would do. At one point, I would just say enough. And you know what I would do? I would write down, I would jot down all the, and I would do it chapter by chapter. I was pretty methodical about it. And I had in my mind what I really needed to convey from a historical standpoint. And I would kind of jot that down in a fragmentary sense so that it wouldn't get too overwhelming, and then just kind of go from there and try to write it and include that stuff as it came to my mind. And then I would go back and look at it and make sure it was historically accurate and add pieces, words from primary source documents and stuff as I needed to make it more authentic. So my notes on this book are embarrassingly voluminous. over 12 years, you get some notes, right?
Thank you. That's awesome. We got another question, or it wasn't really a question. It just said, nicely done. Thank you so much. And they'll be reading your book soon.
Oh, thank you.
And then several other just compliments for you. Really enjoyed the book or looking forward to reading it. And
Thank you.
looks like we have another question. Oh, I believe this is Haley. Thank you so much. I can hardly wait to read your new book. Does anybody else have any questions for John? Just type them in the chat window.
I may have worn you out. Oh, Anne's got a question.
Yeah.
I'll
In the
repeat it.
book, which is terrific, you talk about the seance within the White House.
Yes.
Tell me tell that story, because it is fascinating.
Yes. So Mary Todd Lincoln, the war was very, very tough on the Lincolns. Just as soon as they got to the White House, they were just engulfed in an ocean of misery and blood and destruction and death. And the first Union officer killed in the war was a friend of theirs, a young man named Elmer Ellsworth, killed across the river in Alexandria, Virginia. Not long after that, a very dear friend of theirs, Ned Baker, was a friend of theirs from Illinois, and then he was later a senator from Oregon. He was killed at Ball's Bluff, just up the Potomac from Washington, near Leesburg. They lost a son in the White House, Willie, died of typhoid fever. It was a second son. They had a son, Eddie, who had died earlier. Mary Lincoln, in a lot of ways, was a very strong woman. Lincoln, I think, would not have been president without Mary Lincoln. She pushed him early on, or encouraged him is a better word, I think. Always had confidence in him. And when he needed it, she supplied it. But unfortunately, she was just not equipped somehow to deal with all the death and destruction and trauma that came their way when they got to Washington. And after Willie died, I think it really was downhill from there. And one of the things that when you read the book, you'll see Lincoln is coping with both trying to prosecute this war and trying to, as best he can, help Mary hang on. It's kind of a losing battle. But she started to reach out, grasp for straws, and it was very seances and the mediums and communicating with the spirit world was popular back then. And so she started seeing these spiritualists try to get into contact with Willie, and she lost two or three, I can't remember now, brothers fighting for the Confederate Army. Her family was split, like so many were. So she was trying to reach her loved ones who had been killed. So she held seances, and Lincoln gets wind of this, and he's kind of curious, what's going on here? So he sits in on a seance, so I depict this, I think, in the beginning of the third part of the book, first chapter of a seance. And the name of the spiritualist, I think, is Nettie Coleman in the chapter. That she's actually a synthesis of 3 or 4 other spiritualists, but I very closely track in that chapter one of the seances that was held in the Red Room that Lincoln did go to and attended, and one of the attendees there in his cabinet wrote about it afterwards. So I had a first-hand account of that seance. So as I describe it, it's pretty much as it happened. And Mary, as I say, was convinced that she was communicating with Willie, which Lincoln didn't buy into. It broke his heart, but he didn't want to. He didn't knock it down. He wanted Mary to have the comfort, I think. But yeah, it's very interesting. There's a lot in this novel that is famous, iconic scenes like the Gettysburg Address and the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. But there's a lot in this novel of those lesser known incidents that kind of make up a life in full that humanize Lincoln. It's a lot of stuff like that.
I absolutely agree, having read it. Absolutely loved it. So Jude asked, congrats on your labor of love. At what point did you get editors and publishers involved, since the journey was so protracted?
Oh, that's a long story. Oh my gosh. Just very, very briefly, and it's part of it's a sad story. The very first agent I had lined up years and years ago got brain cancer and died. And his portfolio was divided up. And the agent who inherited it was a great agent, But unfortunately, it was really my fault. The novel wasn't finished, and I didn't know what I was doing. As I say, I've mostly written nonfiction. A nonfiction book, depending on your track record and stuff, you can sell a nonfiction book based on an idea. I've sold nonfiction books, believe it or not, with a one paragraph proposal, believe it or not, just because they knew my work. But I soon discovered fiction's not like that. They want to see the whole thing. They want to see what that novel is. I didn't know that. And this agent was mostly a nonfiction agent. But anyway, so we took this novel out. It was a half finished. At that point, I thought I was going to do this like James Nishner, like 1,000-page novel. And as you can, it was, as it should have been no surprise, editors were not particularly interested in that. So I went back to the drawing board. Long story short, I was hooked up with Marley Rousseff, and who's just a wonderful agent. And Marley said, "John, we're going to find this book a home." And Republic Books, which is its home, has been fantastic. All's well that ends well. It was a long, long road, as finding homes for books often are.
Thank you. I have a couple questions about research, actually, if you don't mind. One was from Mary, what was the name and location of the Soldiers' Home, and did Lincoln go there? And the other one that's kind of related was if you visited Robert Todd Lincoln's home in Manchester.
I have. It's in Lexington, Kentucky. The Todd home is a great place to visit. Lexington, Kentucky is a fantastic place. The Athens of the South, it's known as. Mary Todd Lincoln was from a well-to-do family. Her father was a banker and a businessman, and her mother died early on when she was young, and she didn't get along real well with her stepmother. So it was a little bit of a family, dynamic going on there. And it was a slaveholding family. The Civil War is a very complicated time of American history. So, Abraham Lincoln, the president of the United States, he's married to this woman from a slaveholding family, believe it or not. And his best friend in life, Josh Speed, who was from Kentucky, is a slaveholder during the Civil War. Josh Speed's brother, James Speed, becomes Lincoln's attorney general in the latter part of the war. So lots of complicated relations going on. But the Mary Todd House is a great place to go in Lexington. The old soldiers' home, I think they're calling it President's Cottage these days. It's in Northwest Washington, off kind of near Georgia Avenue. It is open to the public. It probably isn't now during coronavirus, but you can go there. I've been there 2 or 3 times. The young lady that was in charge of education programs there, I don't know if she still is, was from Gaffney. I'm not sure if she's still there or not, just up the road from Spartanburg. But it is a great, great place. Was that the question about the Soldiers' Home? I think that was the question. It's just up on the edge of town, up near the Maryland line in DC. Yeah.
Kind of relating, if I can stop you there a little bit, Tish asks, you were just talking about kind of the difficulty of the historical time. Yeah. If Lincoln's words and decisions pertaining to Black Americans and systemic racism have been under the microscope, did your research uncover some of the complexities that he had to grapple with as a leader? And is that dimension reflected in the story? Yeah,
everybody is a product of their times, and you have to take them as they were in their times. Lincoln, of course, was very forward-thinking for his times, and as I say, was the giant figure in helping to free millions of enslaved Americans. But of course, he said some things and did some things that today we would consider not acceptable at all. And I do touch on some of that in the book. For example, he thought, as many people did, that once emancipation came, that it might be difficult for the white and black races to live together. So there was a whole movement going on back then, the colonization movement. The idea was to repatriate freed slaves to Africa, or perhaps someplace in Central or South America. He had a meeting in the White House with a blue group of African American leaders, and they just abused him of that notion. They pretty much let him know, no, we're Americans. You know, we're Americans. We're staying here. I depict in one of the chapters a very famous, well, not to most people today, but a meeting he had with Frederick Douglass in the White House, the great abolitionist. Frederick Douglass came to see him because he was out trying to raise black troops of the war effort, and came to tell Lincoln he was having some trouble because they weren't paying them as much as they were white people. They weren't getting the same promotions as white people, white soldiers, the same benefits. And so he came to talk that out with Lincoln. And Lincoln sympathized with him totally, and basically says, we're working on it. You know, you've just got to have some patience. Lincoln, when he gives, his relationship with Frederick Douglass is very interesting, but when he gives his second inaugural address in March of 1865, near the end of his life, after it's over, Douglass comes to the White House reception. At first, they won't let him in because he's black, but somebody comes and tells Lincoln, you know, hey, Douglass is out there, and Lincoln says, let him in. And so they let Frederick Douglass in, and he enters the White House in the reception room, and Lincoln purposely says in a loud voice, here comes my friend Douglass. Everybody can see it. And he asks Frederick Douglass what he thought of his second inaugural address. And Frederick Douglass says, Mr. Lincoln, that was a sacred effort, So it's a nice story.
Kind of relating to that one as well, Kevin asked, can you say a few words about what you said was a complicated faith? He certainly referenced his faith in his second inaugural address that you were describing.
Yeah, Lincoln, his faith has been a subject of scholarly study and some debate over the years. You know, some people have described him as more of an Old Testament guy than a New Testament guy, but he was a man of deep faith during those White House years, and as the war went on, his faith deepened. And Lincoln may have known the Bible better, at least as well or better than any president we've ever had. He quoted it all the time. You know, for example, his famous phrase, a house divided against itself cannot stand, which he used before the Civil War to describe the country. That's right from the Bible. That's Matthew 12:25, where it says, every kingdom divided against itself will fail, and every city and house divided against itself cannot stand. He read the Bible a lot in his spare time. What spare time he had, he read the Bible. Interestingly though, he never joined a church. He went to church a lot in both Springfield and Washington, and they rented a pew. That's what you did back then. And he liked going to church. He enjoyed the sermons. He was a friend of the ministers. He never joined a church his whole life. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it was he was just uncomfortable with the church dogma. So it was rigid dogma in some of those churches at the time. And he was never baptized his entire life. So even though he was a man of great faith, and as I say, he would not have made it through the war without his faith, I think. There's been some debate about whether he was a Christian or not. His widow, Mary, after he was gone, and some of his friends said that he was a Christian at heart or in essence. Others who knew him, when asked about that, said, we're not too sure about that. So, you know, exactly what his faith was, it's hard to tell because he didn't wear it on his sleeve, but he was definitely a man of great faith. And if you read the second inaugural address, he expresses his view that the Civil War was God's way of judging and punishing the nation, both North and South, for the sin of slavery. And all the bloodshed was in effect, he said, God's way of cleansing the land of that sin.
You did a lot of research on this, obviously, and one of the questions from Steve was why do you describe this as a novel rather a biography, or I guess why you chose to make it a novel rather than a biography?
Yeah, I chose to try to make it a novel for two reasons. There's several really great nonfiction biographies out there about Lincoln already, so not sure the world needed mine, but I really wanted to try to bring him alive, and I hope that's what this does. And it is fiction. You know, in the dialogue, for example, I built into the dialogue words that Lincoln and others actually wrote and said, but not all of it is words they wrote and said. I mean, I filled in those gaps. Same with the way I describe the scenes and the events. The details I have filled in with my imagination, and that's what makes it fiction. Yeah.
Speaking of details, Edwin wants to know early in his life, Lincoln was well known for his humor, and with the overwhelming weight of the crises, both national and personal, that he faced during the presidency, was his humor still a marked part of his personality during the White House years?
Yes.
And your book.
Yeah, well, more so maybe the White House years. Yeah, so Lincoln, as some of you may know, was famously had this famous melancholy side. You know, he liked, you know, sometimes he could be very somber, and given what he was facing, who can blame him? He dealt with that with humor. He was famous for his humor and telling stories and telling jokes. They said that Lincoln was so funny he could make a cat laugh, people said. That humor doesn't necessarily translate to this day and age all that well. Humor has changed. So that was a difficult thing. When I tried to actually put some of his jokes in, it just, you know, it doesn't translate. Also, even though Lincoln was a very, like I say, he was a man of great integrity and honesty and all that, I got to tell you, he liked a dirty joke. A lot of his humor was reportedly pretty risque. And so a lot of it didn't get written down because, you know, that was considered, that's just something they didn't do. They didn't write that stuff down back then. So a lot of his stuff that people said he was hilarious about didn't get written down. But both he and Mary Lincoln had great senses of humor. They could mimic people. That was another part of his humor that's hard to get on a page. That they were very, apparently both great mimics. So that's how he dealt with driving away the sadness and the melancholy during the war was humor. He would start cabinet meetings off by telling jokes and reading from humorists out loud to his cabinet members and stuff like that. I tried to get as much of that in the book as I could. You'll have to let me know if I did a good job or not.
After everybody reads it, they'll know for sure, right? I think you did, definitely. I think we're gonna start wrapping up the questions a little bit. I know that we've been in here for about an hour.
Yeah, we've hit 7 o'clock. People probably need to go have another glass of wine.
I did.
With dinner.
I did want to say.
After listening to me, maybe more wine.
We will be. John will be signing books after the event and putting in your personalizations. Did you have anything you wanted to kind of wrap up with, John?
No, except thank you all for being here. And yeah, we sold a lot of books. This was a fundraiser for Hub City, and so all the books that y'all bought online, you know, through Hub City, all the full cover price of the book has gone to them, and they are a nonprofit. And so please continue to support them. That is so great. And should I say anything else? No, I think we're good. Except thank you all for coming in. It was just so great of you. As I say, I'm humbled, and thanks very much. And we will get all the books signed.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yay, all the happy messages. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a good night. Thanks for joining us.